Welcome back. In today's episode, we conclude with the interview with David Sanderson, the last passenger to leave Flight 1549. In today's episode, you learn what to do when your personal plane crashes.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performance Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. If you were to go back 10 years ago, what do you wish you had done better 10 years ago?
10 years ago, I think the one thing I wish I would have done better, and that would be, I would be when my children were still in school. I would say that I would have stepped back a little bit from being in such an achiever mode and focusing on just making money and trying to serve myself and what I was doing, because I was still the head of security with Tony at that time. I was traveling. I was making a lot of money. My eldest daughter and I had a very poor relationship, and a lot of it was probably her age, and a lot of it was probably the way I handle things. And so I would say I would probably have stepped back a little bit, been more active in hers and my kids' lives than I was in the way I am right now.
Yeah, I have a similar story. I used to work when I was in New York. I was traveling literally all over the world, and my son thought I was in the Secret Service or a spy or something. He goes, "You just like, he's here, then he's there, then he's there." He's like, "Yeah." So he just told me that a few days ago.
How old's your son?
He's 18 now, but when he was, he was 8 and 9, he and his friends thought I was some sort of secret spy
James
or something.
Bond.
Exactly.
James Bond. Yeah.
Who holds you accountable now?
Well, right now, I'm accountable to my creator, number one. That's the person who holds me accountable every day. But being an entrepreneur, and like you and other entrepreneurs out there, you really got to hold yourself accountable. And candidly, my wife holds me accountable a lot, especially for that side of the world, because candidly, like I said, for years she didn't. And now she reminds me of things that I need to be involved with, which helps me a lot to keep my focus on that. But I have to hold myself accountable, because right now it's me and myself and a few assistants that I have, but I try to hold myself really accountable to my creator, because ultimately when I have to face that door one day to get into the big house, I've got to answer for it. And so he's going to hold me accountable there. So right now, hopefully every day when I pray, he's holding me accountable to fulfill the mission that he put me on this earth to do every day.
Very nice. If you had an hour to interview someone, dead or alive, who would it be, and what would you ask them?
It would be Jesus Christ. I would have loved to have been a disciple, traveling with him and just asking him the questions on how did this really come to be? How did this whole mentality of heaven and earth and the spirit and all this come to be? So I've been asked that question before, and I can't think of a better person to ask than Jesus Christ to have a one-on-one interview. I mean, because one thing about Jesus, he'll tell you the truth. He's not going to give you any BS. He's going to tell you the way it is, whether you like it or not. And I think that would be one of the best learning experiences that anybody could potentially have, is learning how this thing really started. Why is it the way it is?
Dave, give us a little insight into your book and why you wrote it.
Well, thank you. The book that I wrote is Moments Matter, and that book came about really. It wasn't really a thought of having a book. About 2 years ago, my former assistant Vicky called me one day on the phone and said, "You really need to record what happened that day and what happened afterwards for your grandkids and their grandkids, because one day she said you're not going to be here, and candidly, the story, you need to have the story recorded." So I told her the story about two ladies who lived down the street from me. They were older ladies. They were sisters, probably in their 70s or 80s. And have you ever had lived down the street from somebody and some older folks who would need some help with a light bulb or technology or whatever? They call you and say, "Can you help me with my TV?" So you go down there's a neighbor and do it. And one day I was down there helping them, and on their table they had some books laid out. So I started looking through the books, and all of a sudden there were pictures of people in concentration camps. And all of a sudden I sort of looked at them and I saw the numbers on their forearms, inside their forearms. So I asked them if they were in the concentration. They were. They were both in Bergen-Belsen, during World War II. They survived.
Wow.
And I told them, listen, if you need to record your story. I said, let me come down here and just record your story for posterity, because when you're not here, at least your story will be told. And they would never let me do that. They would never talk about it with me. I see the pictures. So when Vicki said that, I came back to say, you know what, you're right. So we spent 8 or 9 hours on the phone going through minute by minute details of what happened that day to what happened afterwards. And all of a sudden we realized there was like 12 lessons in here and skills that I used and resources that I used and other people used that day that really could, relate to what happens in business. So we decided that there's enough material here for a book about all these things that I did that day and other people did that could help other people in future when they face a traumatic situation. But I didn't know how to write a book, and candidly, it's all random. So fortunately for me, Cindy Wrightson, she and I were close friends, so I called her because her skill set is being able to take all the disparate information and make it cohesive, and so people could relate to it. So she took all this information. I would interview with her. I would write some stuff for her, and she put my information in the book called Moments Matter. And the way that we got the title is one day we were talking about the content of the book, and I said, one thing that just sort of came to mind. I said, Cindy, one thing I realized through all this is every moment in my life really mattered. When I learned how to swim back in the 60s, where candidly that skill saved my life that day. And, if I didn't have that moment, if my parents didn't make me learn how to swim, I may not be here today. So all of a sudden we're like, that's the title. All these moments in our life matter that you don't ever think are going to matter. One day, 50, 60 years from now, may be the one thing you need to have to save yourself or save somebody else. And that's how the book came together. And we launched it in New Jersey. We launched it at the hospital where I went, and we donated 100% of the money from the proceeds from that book signing that night to the hospital foundation, so somebody else in New Jersey, when they face their traumatic experience, at least have enough money to be able to have services like I did that day. So that's how we did the book, and that's how we launched the book.
Oh, that's wonderful. Tell us a little bit about survivor guilt. I know you talk about this at times.
It really, survivor guilt came to play to me pretty quickly. And so if you remember back in 2009, later that year after the plane crash, there was another plane crash in Buffalo. That little plane that crashed into the house in Buffalo on entry.
Yes.
And though it was pretty tragic, and I was getting phone calls left and right. Every time there's a plane crash, I get a phone call from somebody. But that was specifically challenging for me because I had a client on that plane from Charlotte. She was a senior vice president of marketing, and she was heading to Buffalo, and that company had lost one of their executives, and I had a meeting coming up with them. So I had two things going on at the same time. They were suffering from having one of their employees and associates pass away and perish in a plane crash. I survived. In addition, I did an interview for a TV station in Montreal, and one of the questions I got that day was, why do you think that they died and you didn't? Why did you survive? It was sort of like, why are you so special? And I took it that way. I'm like thinking I wasn't ready for that question. And my answer was, it just wasn't my time. I don't know. I can't explain what happened to them, but I can explain it wasn't my time to perish. So when I showed up at that meeting, it was not really a meeting. It really turned out to be more of just a conversation with everybody, telling me my story and how fortunate they did to have her on their team. And, do whatever you can for her family, because I know her family's suffering now, just like you're suffering. And so, that situation was my first survivor guilt, that I was really, why did I live and they didn't? But then, fortunately for me, I've been able to process it by speaking. I've spoken close to 800 times now around the world in some places I've never thought that I'd go to people I never thought that I'd meet. So some of the people on the plane that I was on have not even processed it yet. So they're in deep depression. They have PTSD. And so it's, I tell folks the way I handle survivor guilt is I process it by speaking and sharing my story to those so they can hear it. So they're hopefully have a thought process if they ever get in a situation like I did.
Nice. If you had the ability to go back and talk to the 13-year-old Dave, what would you tell him?
Be yourself. Be who you are. Do not try to be something you're not. I think that was probably the one thing that I would say. And that goes back to what my mom was always telling me, which I didn't listen to, is be authentic and be congruent. And at 13 years old, I thought I was pretty much probably a hot shot. I was pretty good at everything that I did. I didn't have to do much effort. But I would say right now, just be who you are. And when I was Thor, there was a movie done last year. I was in it. I was chosen to be one of the 5 stories of a movie called "Be Who You Are," and it premiered in Philadelphia. And I was honored to be in the movie and have my story in the movie with 4 other people. But one thing, what's interesting, the reason I'm telling you this and why I would tell myself that at 13 is, I found out after they filmed the movie, it was getting ready for release, and they were going to launch this at a gay and lesbian film festival in Philadelphia. And the producer and director called me and said, "We'd love to have you here. It's going to be here." And so I'm thinking, wow, can I really fit in? Is that something that, I'm heterosexual. Am I going to fit into this thing? So I was really debating in my mind. But then all of a sudden I did an interview before the premiere up there, and I got a question. I was like, I said, on that day on that plane, I really didn't care if you were black, white, Hispanic, gay, lesbian, whatever. Everybody was in it for everybody else. No one was better than anybody else. That answer really took me to a different place, because that's the point where I realized, I was who I was, and I wasn't trying to put on a face or trying to put a facade on. And that really opened me up for a lot of things that I could do to help more different type of folks that I would probably never associate to, and open up a whole new different pathway for me.
Nice. If you had 90 seconds to leave advice for your kids, what would it be?
I would tell my kids to, focus. We've given you a value set. As you've grown up, sometimes you've taken it, sometimes you haven't. Hopefully it's ingrained in you to when you have to face your moment in time, what I call now, and I'll tell them the same thing, what I call your own personal plane crash. Whether that's you lose a job, whether that's a health issue, whether that's a car crash, a flood, fire, whatever it may be. Everybody in your life, you will have a personal plane crash. Just remember what your mother and I have taught you, what's between right and wrong. Make the right decision for you and other people. Don't let other people force their decision on you. You make it what's right for you, and ultimately it will turn out right. It may not feel good at that moment. You may feel that you have not done the right thing. But as long as it's in alignment with your value set and your belief system, and you have a solid belief system, we believe that we've done the right thing for you and by you, then ultimately it'll turn out well. And I would love to share that with my kids. I've shared that with my kids at times, because one thing I've shared with my kids, Thor, and each child has been told this many times, and I just told this one over the weekend, that every decision has a consequence. Whether it's positive or negative, every decision has a consequence, and every decision is a choice. And whether you do it or don't do it, whether you get in that car with somebody who's drunk or not, that's your choice. You got to take personal responsibility for that, because there's a consequence. And hopefully there's a positive consequence, but the occasion there's negative, is how you respond to that negative consequence is how you're going to be defined in your life.
Yeah, it's interesting. My son just went off to college, and I had that very discussion with him. I said, you're going to be making decisions now that are going to have consequences, and you're a man now, and I can no longer protect you, and you're going to have to pay the price or reap the rewards from the actions that you take, and choose wisely.
Yep, now it counts.
Yeah,
what? I can cover you for the first 18. 18 years in one day. Like I told someone the other day when I said, I told them the worst day in your life is the day after you graduate from college, because now you're on your own and no one really cares.
Yeah.
And you have to do it yourself. By the way, Dad wants you out of the house now.
Yeah.
So, I said, so now you have to step up and put your big girl pants or big boy pants on and you start making decisions.
Yeah, it's funny. He got into a car accident, a mild car accident, but it did total his car. Fortunately, it did not hurt anybody else, and it was very close to where we live. And he said, "Dad, I need you. I was in a car accident." I said, "Are you okay?" "Yes." "Everybody else okay?" "Great." I said, "Well, what would you like me to do?" He goes, "Well, I need you to come here." I said, "Well, are the police there?" "Yes." "Everyone's okay?" "Great." I said, "Well, you're a man now. You need to start dealing with these things." And then I did walk over, and that was funny because the police officer came up and started talking with me. I said, "I think you're looking for the other adult here," and pointed to him. He's like, "I don't know what to do." I was like, "Well, you better start learning." Then the tow truck guy came and said, "Where do you want us to take the car?" I said, "Not my car, it's his car." And he looks at me, he goes, "There's a man growing opportunity, isn't it?" I said, "Yes, sir." And that's and I think a lot of kids are missing that nowadays. Because they're being protected and everything's being done for them. They've got to grow up at some point. So
they have to grow up. Exactly. I think you're exactly right. I think one of the biggest problems in this country is parents coddling their kids and not letting them make decisions and have consequences for their decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember my best friend in high school, Thor's father was the sheriff in our county. And so, if you got in trouble, he'd be the first guy to find out, right? Second would be your old man.
Sure.
But my dad told me, he said, "Listen, if Freddie's dad ever put you in jail, I'm not coming to get you."
Yeah.
And one thing I tell my first lesson in leadership was my father, because my father whatever he said, he was going to do. You're only as good as your word, as my dad was. So, excuse me. So when he said it, you knew it's black. There's no black and white. It's black right here. It's going to happen.
Yep.
So I think hopefully I've instilled that in my kids, but we'll find out, and you'll find out about your son, and a lot of people will find out that hopefully they're the value sets you've given them, that they understand that they have to start making decisions and having consequences for them.
Absolutely. Well, tell us how Peak Performance Nation can get a hold of you and what you're doing and some things that are coming up for you.
Well, thank you. So the best way for folks to get a hold of me, and I love to interact, is DaveSandersonSpeaks.com, my website. I really post everything what's going on there. My weekly newsletter, I would love to have people check that out, because that's where I put my new blogs. I write a blog every week, and I don't have anybody to interact. That's between me and them. So there's nobody interfering in the middle. If you send me a note, it comes straight to me. But if you want to really find out what's going on, Facebook, my page, Dave Sanderson Speaks. I'm really sharing where I'm going to be speaking and doing workshops, and of course with the movie coming out, and I'm sharing information, a little bit of background about that there, and Twitter's Dave Sanderson too, which right now I'm learning how to put things out, and a little bit. This week is all about, I'll be putting things out about the movie this week, Sully, about things about going on, which I was involved with, and hopefully we'll get in the movie. And then LinkedIn is where I do a lot of my business interaction and share my business thoughts and how the business lessons from that day that I used on the plane really translate to business at David Sanderson on LinkedIn. So I would love for you to interact with me any or all those ways. I'd be honored for you to do that. And if you say go to my calendar on my website, if you see I'm close to you and in a city, please let me know. And I'd love to invite you to be my guest at one of my events.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Any parting advice for the listeners?
I would say, I think, we talk about peak performance, but it all comes down to how you manage your mind and, what we call state management, how to manage your mind. Whenever you get in that unresourceful state, the one thing I believe is, and we all going to get in those states in business, personal life, wherever that may be, is just remember, you can't make a really solid decision and choice unless you're in a resourceful state. So, the one thing I really talk about is how to be resourceful. It's those people who have little resources but are resourceful, the ones who all of a sudden go from being excellent to outstanding. So put yourself in a really optimum state every time you're ready to make a major decision, and you'll be at least make the right decision for you and your value set.
Great advice. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the movie when it comes out next week. Have an absolutely amazing day, and I know the listeners are going to want you back on here and to share some more advice as well. So thank you. Every peak performer that has ever lived or will live does one thing extremely well. They know how to take their ideas and execute on them. Ideas and knowledge are not power, but the ability to execute on them, that is real power. If you consider yourself a peak performer and really want to take your game to the next level and truly master the science of execution, I would like to send you some information about our upcoming event. Business Execution Summit. Simply take your phone and text the word BE Summit, one word, to 41411. And I'll send you some additional information on how to master the most important skill you will ever acquire for your life or your business. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already done so, please head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Also, please share this with family, friends, coworkers, or anyone that could benefit from this information. To make it very easy to share these episodes, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin, click on the episode that you want to share, and you can post it to your timeline. You just might be helping one of your friends on Facebook by sharing it on your page. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. The email is info@thorconklin. While at the website, please sign up for our weekly newsletter with additional tricks, tips, tools, and psychology on how to be a peak performer. Remember, these episodes are anywhere between 6 and 35 minutes and are meant to be consumed during dot time doing other things. Until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.